When I was freezing, my son said, "Mom, I don't have time for this. Just dress warmer. I'll call you later." That's when I knew, not suspected, not feared, but knew something had broken between us that couldn't be fixed. I was 74. My joints ached, the cold stung through the walls, and my hands shook as I held the phone. But his words hurt more than the cold ever could. He didn't ask how I was feeling. He didn't ask if I had eaten. He didn't ask if the stove was working or if the water pipes had frozen. No, he just sighed, irritated, and told me he was busy, as if I had called to chat about the weather, as if I wasn't his mother. Let me go back a bit. I live in the same house where I raised him. Every dent in the wall, every squeaky stair board holds a memory. I scrubbed floors while he played with toy cars. I cooked 3 meals a day while holding 2 jobs after my husband passed. I gave up dating. I gave up vacations. I gave up sleep. And I never asked for anything back, not until that day. The heating failed sometime during the night. I woke up with my breath clouding in the air. The radiators were cold, the floor like ice. I called the heating service right away. They said it'd take 2 days. 2 nights in this cold? At my age? So I did what any mother would do. I called my only child. His phone rang 3 times. Then his voice came on, not warm, not worried, just annoyed. "Yeah, Mom, I'm in the middle of something." I told him what had happened, that the heat had gone out, that the house was freezing. He said, "Mom, I don't have time for this. Just dress warmer. I'll call you later." Then he hung up. And in that moment, a kind of silence fell inside me. Not outside, outside. The wind howled, the house creaked. But inside, there was a silence that felt like standing at the edge of a cliff. Like something had ended. Just dress warmer. I sat down in the kitchen and stared at the window, covered in frost. The table we used to eat dinner at. The stove I cooked on when he was sick. The window he used to draw smiley faces on with his finger in winter. He didn't even ask if I had food. Resentment is strange. It doesn't roar. It doesn't slam doors. It whispers. I remembered the Christmas 3 years ago, when I baked his favorite pie, only for him to say, "Oh, we already ate at Sarah's mom's." I remembered the time I gave him the last $500 in my account for his rent, and he said, "You should have saved more." I remembered when I asked if I could visit for his daughter's birthday, and he replied, "We're keeping it small this year." All those moments. Small, sharp cuts. Brushed off like lint. I thought of how he used to cling to me when he was 5, crying because he didn't want me to leave for work. And now, at 40, he couldn't even spare 10 minutes to check if I had heat. I got up, slowly, and began layering clothes. 1 sweater, then another. A coat. A scarf. Gloves. 2 pairs of socks. But no amount of fabric could block the cold I felt from his words. The phone didn't ring again. That whole day I waited. For a text. A call. A knock. Anything. Nothing came. Around sunset, I couldn't take it anymore. I stepped outside into the biting wind and walked, careful not to slip, to my neighbors, the Harrisons. We'd waved to each other for years, but never shared more than a few words. I knocked once. Mrs. Harrison opened the door. Her face changed the moment she saw me. "Oh my goodness, come in. Come in, you're freezing." They sat me down by the fireplace, wrapped me in a blanket, gave me tea and soup, asked questions, listened. And in that moment, I broke. Not loudly. I didn't sob, but something behind my eyes let go, and I felt tears slide down my cheeks as silently as snowfall. They didn't ask for explanations. They didn't judge. They just cared. Later, in their guest room, warm and safe, I stared at the ceiling and thought about my son. He used to call me his hero. "Mom, you're the strongest person I know. I don't know how you do it all. I'll take care of you one day." Lies. He lied with those sweet words, because when the time came, when I really needed him, just one day, one evening, 1 hour, he couldn't be bothered. He probably went out to dinner that night. Maybe watched TV. Maybe told his wife I was being dramatic. But I wasn't being dramatic. I was cold. I was alone. And he made a choice. He chose not to care. And for the first time in my life, I let myself feel that. Fully. No excuses. No, maybe he's tired. No, he means well. He had time, just not for me. I fell asleep that night with the quiet thought, maybe blood isn't always family. Because that evening, I wasn't saved by my son. I was saved by the kindness of near strangers. People who didn't owe me anything, who didn't gain anything, who didn't hesitate. I'll say this again, for every person out there clinging to hope that someone might one day change, people show you who they are. Believe them. My son had been showing me for years. I just hadn't wanted to see. But now, in the warmth of another family's home, I finally did. And I would not forget. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I wanted peace. And peace can only begin when you stop begging for love from people who've already left you out in the cold. I didn't sleep much that night. Not because the bed was uncomfortable. The Harrisons had gone out of their way to make me feel safe. The room was warm. The blanket was soft. But my mind wouldn't stop turning. I kept hearing his voice, just dress warmer. Such simple words. Dismissive. Empty. And yet they rolled around in my head like stones, clattering against everything I thought I understood about love, about family. I stared at the ceiling and thought of all the times I had made excuses for him. For years, I convinced myself that he was just tired or busy or overwhelmed. That he didn't mean to forget my birthday. That he wasn't trying to exclude me when he didn't invite me on trips. That he didn't realize how hurtful it was to say, "We're just doing a small Thanksgiving this year, every year." But now I saw it clearly. He hadn't forgotten. He had chosen not to include me. Not because he couldn't, but because he didn't want to. That realization burned worse than the cold. When his father died, my son was only 9. I remember sitting at the kitchen table, tears in my eyes, trying to figure out how to pay the bills. I worked nights at the diner, then cleaned houses during the day. I never let him see how exhausted I was. I smiled, packed his lunch, and cheered at his soccer games with tired feet and swollen hands. Not once did I complain. Not once did I ask for thanks. But I thought that one day, when he was older, he'd understand. He didn't. He grew up, moved away, got married. And with every passing year, he drifted farther. It started small. He stopped calling as often. Birthdays turned into brief texts. Mother's Day was reduced to a generic card with no handwriting. When I asked if I could come visit, he'd say, "We're kind of swamped this weekend." When I offered to help with the baby, he said, "We've got it covered." I told myself I didn't want to be a burden. But last night proved the truth. I wasn't a burden. I was an afterthought. That morning, I sat quietly at the Harrisons' kitchen table, nursing a warm cup of tea. The heat from the mug didn't reach my heart. I smiled at Mrs. Harrison's kindness, nodded along to her words, but inside I was somewhere else entirely, walking down a hallway of memories that now felt bitter. I remembered when I offered to help pay for his wedding. I had scraped together some savings, working overtime shifts at the store. He had looked at me and said, "Thanks, but Sarah's parents are covering most of it." It's okay. It wasn't just what he said, it was how he said it. Like my offer embarrassed him. Like I didn't belong in that part of his life. I remembered when I bought a little sweater for my granddaughter's first birthday. I had taken the bus downtown, picked it out myself, wrapped it with care. He never mentioned it. I saw photos of her birthday party on social media, a party I hadn't been invited to. She wore a different dress. No one thanked me. I remembered when I got sick 2 winters ago. A bad flu. I called him because I was scared. I was shivering and dizzy and couldn't keep anything down. He picked up and said, "Can you call your doctor? I'm about to step into a meeting." Then he hung up. I had sat on the bathroom floor, trying to breathe, trying to keep from crying. I didn't want to make a fuss. I didn't want to seem needy. But the resentment had started then. A seed. And last night, in that cold house, with my fingers stiff and my legs trembling, it bloomed. I had raised a son who believed kindness was optional. I had raised a son who thought love was conditional, based on convenience, time, usefulness. And somewhere along the way, I had stopped being useful to him. "You should stay as long as you need," Mr. Harrison said that morning, interrupting my thoughts. I looked at him, a man who wasn't related to me in any way. He had gone out and shoveled his driveway in the dark so I wouldn't slip. His wife had given up their guest bed for me. Their teen daughter even brought me a charger for my phone. They didn't owe me anything, and yet they gave. Meanwhile, my son, the one I sacrificed for, worked for, built a life for, gave me nothing. Not even warmth. He hadn't called back. Not a text. Not a follow-up. Nothing. As if I had never called at all. I told the Harrisons I was going to walk back home and check on the house. Mrs. Harrison offered to come with me, but I told her I needed a moment alone. The walk was slow. My knees hurt, but the air was clear and the sun was low in the sky, casting everything in gold. I looked at the outline of my house, the place where I had raised a child, laughed, cried, worked, and loved. And for the first time, it didn't feel like mine. Inside, the air was still cold. My breath fogged as I stepped into the kitchen. I touched the back of a chair and thought about all the nights I sat there while my son did his homework. I remembered him falling asleep at the table once, pencil still in hand, and me carrying him to bed. Would he remember that? Would he remember anything? Or was I now just a name in his phone? A voice that interrupted his meetings? I sat down and opened my phone. Still no message. Nothing. I scrolled up through our last conversations, each one shorter than the last. My messages full of warmth, his clipped and impersonal. Can't talk now. Maybe next month. Busy. Later. Each word like a door slowly closing. I wanted to cry, but the tears wouldn't come. I had spent too many years swallowing them. Instead, I made a decision. Not out of anger, but out of clarity. If he didn't want to be part of my present, he didn't get to own my future. I picked up the phone and called my lawyer. Not yet to change anything, just to make an appointment. But even making the call felt like air entering lungs that had been tight for too long. That night, back at the Harrisons, I received a message from my son. One line. Sorry, got tied up. Everything okay now? I stared at it. Sorry, tied up. Everything okay now? He hadn't called to check in. He hadn't asked if I was safe. He hadn't even acknowledged the fact that I could have frozen in that house. He was checking a box. That was all. I didn't reply. For the first time, I let the silence speak for me. And it was louder than anything I could have said. The morning after my son finally texted, I didn't reply. I stared at the message on the screen. Sorry, got tied up. Everything okay now? There was no warmth in it. No urgency. No apology that meant anything. Just 7 words that felt like they were written on autopilot. 7 words that told me I wasn't a priority, just a loose end he was trying to tie up. I left the message unread. Maybe he'd think I hadn't seen it. Maybe he'd worry for a second. But I doubted it. He rarely followed up. The house was still freezing. The heating company was due to come that afternoon. I had layered up again and stood at the window, watching the street outside, trying not to feel the cold inside me that had nothing to do with temperature. The Harrisons had invited me back again for breakfast. But I said I needed time to myself. The truth was I needed space to think. For most of my life, I'd been quiet. I kept peace. I apologized first. I forgave easily. I made excuses for others, even when I was hurting. But that silence had become my cage. And now, for the first time, I could feel the door swinging open. Later that day, as the technician worked on the heating system, I made soup. Something simple, just carrots, potatoes, broth. I used to make it when my son was little. He loved it then. Used to say it was the best part of winter. That memory hit me hard. The way he used to come running into the kitchen, asking, "Is it ready yet, Mom? It smells so good." I used to smile and ladle it out into his favorite blue bowl. He'd eat too, sometimes 3 servings, crumbs of bread scattered around his chair. Now, I wondered if he even remembered, or if those memories had faded into nothing for him, like steam on a window. By the time the technician finished and the radiators began to hum again, the sun had set. The warmth returned to the house, but it didn't reach me. I walked through the hallway, looking at the photos on the wall. Him as a baby, him at graduation, him on his wedding day. No photos of us together in the last 10 years. Not one. I took them down slowly, not out of anger, but to make space. I set them in a box and slid it under the bed. Then I sat at the kitchen table, the one where I had once nursed him through fevers and scraped knees, and I made a decision. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to argue. I was going to stop giving. Quietly. Finally. For years, I'd been helping him behind the scenes. He never knew half of it. I'd paid off the remaining balance on his first car loan when he fell behind. I sent little money transfers when he hinted things were tight. I never asked for it back. I paid the property taxes on a cabin his father left him in his will, so he wouldn't lose it. He never thanked me. Never even asked how I managed. I just did it because I was his mother. But what do you do when being someone's mother no longer means anything? I opened my drawer and pulled out a folder of documents. Banking, legal, estate planning. It was time to change everything. I made an appointment with a notary. The next morning, I bundled up, walked slowly through the slush, and took the bus to town. It was snowing lightly, the kind that sticks to your coat and eyebrows. I watched people rushing by with coffee cups and shopping bags. I felt invisible. The notary was a kind woman. She asked me why I wanted to make changes to my will. I said simply, I wanted to go to the people who cared when it mattered. No questions after that. I removed my son's name from everything. Bank accounts, property, life insurance. Instead, I listed the Harrisons. They didn't know. I didn't do it for praise. I did it because in the moment I needed someone, they had shown up without being asked. That should mean something. And here's the emotional twist I didn't expect. Halfway through signing the papers, I felt guilt. Not doubt, guilt. Because part of me still hoped my son would change. That he'd call, apologize, come over, hug me, and say, I'm sorry I wasn't there. But I realized that hope had kept me trapped for too long. I could either keep waiting for a version of him that didn't exist, or I could let go. So I let go. I finished the paperwork, signed my name, and walked out into the falling snow with a strange mix of grief and relief. When I got home, I saw a missed call from him. For a second, my heart fluttered. I called back. He answered casually, hey, just checking in. You good now? Heat working. Just like that. No urgency. No emotion. Just a box to check off. I said, yes, it's working. Silence. Then, good. I figured it would be. I was going to come by, but we had dinner plans. Dinner plans. That's what he chose over me again. I said nothing. He added, anyway, I'll try to swing by this weekend, okay? I said, that's not necessary. He paused. You sure? I said, yes. I'm fine now. He said, all right then, talk later. And that was it. He hung up. I sat there, phone still in my hand, and felt the last bit of hope die. Not in anger, but like a candle quietly going out. I had done the right thing. That night, I returned to the Harrisons' home with a container of the soup I'd made. I told them thank you again. Mrs. Harrison looked surprised. You don't have to keep thanking us. We just did what anyone would do. But that's the thing. Not everyone would do it. My own son hadn't. Later that evening, I told her, you don't know what it meant to me. That night could have gone very differently. She touched my hand and smiled. We're neighbors. You're not alone. I wanted to cry again, but I didn't. I just nodded. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I had a choice. A choice to stop chasing people who didn't care. A choice to give love where it was returned. A choice to protect the little piece of my heart I had left. And I was going to make that choice again and again and again. Even if it meant closing the door on the one person I never thought I'd have to. The fallout didn't come right away. It crept in slowly, like frost on a window pane, quiet, thin, but impossible to ignore. The first 3 days passed in silence. No calls, no messages. Just the steady hum of the repaired heating system and the occasional creak of the old house settling into the cold. I kept myself busy. I cleaned the cupboards, not because they were dirty, but because I needed something to occupy my hands. I rearranged the photos in the hallway, not the ones of him. Those were still boxed up beneath my bed. I replaced them with old postcards I'd collected over the years. Cities I'd never visited. Mountains I'd never climbed. But somehow, they made me feel less stuck. Outside, the snow had started to melt. Water dripped rhythmically from the eaves, pattering onto the wooden porch below. The sky hung heavy with clouds, not stormy, just dull, the kind of gray that flattened everything it touched. Then, on the fourth day, the phone rang. His name lit up the screen. I watched it vibrate on the table, then fall still. He called again, then again. A message followed soon after. "Hey, been trying to reach you. Everything okay?" I didn't reply. The words felt hollow, like he had copied and pasted them into the phone without even thinking. Later that afternoon, another message buzzed through. "Did something happen? Why aren't you picking up?" I stared at it for a long time. My thumb hovered over the screen, not to reply, but to feel the weight of the choice I was making, to remain quiet. Each unanswered ring felt like a soft echo of all the times I'd waited for him to show up, to remember, to care. By sunset, the tone of his messages had changed. "Look, if this is about the other day, I didn't mean anything by it. You're always so sensitive." I was just busy. Those words punched the air out of my lungs. You're always so sensitive. 3 decades of motherhood, reduced to a personality flaw. That phrase wasn't new, it had been used before. When he forgot Mother's Day and told me I was being dramatic. When he skipped Christmas and claimed I was overthinking things. When I told him I felt left out of his daughter's birthday and he laughed and said, "It's not that deep." It was always easier for him to make me the problem. I set the phone down and looked out the window. The porch light flickered slightly as it always did, casting a pale orange glow over the snow-dusted railing. In the distance, a dog barked once and then fell quiet. A thin layer of mist had started to roll in across the yard, softening the sharp edges of the trees. That night, I made a cup of tea. Chamomile, not because I wanted it, but because it felt like something stable. The smell reminded me of when he was little, when he'd get scared during thunderstorms and crawl into my bed. I used to hold him close, stroke his hair, and whisper, "You're safe." Where was that boy now? The next morning, I received a message from his wife, Sarah. "Hi, just checking in. We're a little worried. Are you okay?" Her tone sounded polite, but distant. It reminded me of the last time I'd seen her at their house last summer. She offered me a glass of water and spent the rest of the afternoon looking at her phone. Didn't ask how I was. Didn't include me in their conversation. I remembered the Christmas I sent her a handmade quilt. Spent weeks stitching it in the evenings. When I handed it to her, she smiled faintly and said, "Oh, that's nice." She never used it. It was never seen again. I didn't reply to her message either. Later that evening, a soft knock echoed through the house. I paused in the hallway, heart thudding. I peered through the side curtain. It was him. He stood there bundled in a coat, shifting from foot to foot. I could see his breath fogging in the cold air. His eyes scanned the windows. He knocked again, more firmly. My hand reached for the doorknob, then stopped. I imagined what he'd say. Probably something rehearsed. Maybe a rushed apology or an excuse. But I didn't want excuses anymore. I stepped back quietly. His knocking slowed, then stopped. I watched him linger for a moment, then walk away. The sound of his boots crunching in the snow faded into the distance. He didn't leave a note. The next morning, another message. "I don't know what this is about, but it's not fair. We're family." There it was again, that word. Family. A word he used like a shield, something to hide behind whenever it suited him. It didn't matter how many birthdays were missed, how many visits were skipped, how many phone calls cut short. As long as we were a family, I was expected to forgive everything, to accept the scraps and say thank you. I thought about all the holidays I'd spent alone, about the time I made his favorite apple pie, only to be told last minute that they were eating at Sarah's parents' house. He'd taken the pie with him, said, "Maybe they'll like it." They never returned the dish. The texts kept coming. "Please just call me. We need to talk." This is really upsetting me. The weight of each message wasn't in what was said, but in what wasn't. Not once did he say, "I'm sorry." Not once did he ask what I needed. Only what he felt. What he wanted. By the end of the week, an unfamiliar number lit up my phone. I hesitated, then answered. It was my granddaughter. Her voice was hesitant. "Grandma, Dad said you're mad at him. Are you mad at me too?" The innocence in her voice hit me harder than anything else. I sat down, suddenly lightheaded. No, sweetheart. Not at all. This isn't about you. Then why won't you talk to him? I took a long breath. The air in the room felt thick, like walking through fog. Sometimes, I said gently, grown-ups have to set boundaries when they've been hurt. It doesn't mean we stop loving. It just means we start protecting. She was quiet for a moment, then said, I miss you. I miss you too, baby girl. After we hung up, I sat in silence. The clock ticked on the wall. The scent of the tea from earlier still lingered faintly. I stared at the photo of her on the side table, the only one I had left on display. I never wanted her to feel abandoned. But I also couldn't lie anymore. Pretend things were fine when they weren't. That evening, the sky turned a deeper gray. Snow began falling again, soft, slow flakes that danced in the glow of the porch light. I wrapped a shawl around my shoulders and sat by the window. Another message arrived. We're coming by this weekend. We need to talk. I didn't reply. Saturday came. The snow had stopped, but the world outside was white and still. They arrived just after noon, parked in the driveway. I watched from the window as they approached the porch. Sarah looked uneasy. My son knocked again, a little harder this time. They waited. I didn't move. Eventually, they turned and walked back to the car. As they drove off, the mailbox clanged. Later, I retrieved the note. We're hurt. This isn't right. You're tearing the family apart. I stood in the hallway, the note in hand, the warmth of the house holding me gently. Then, with a steady hand, I folded the paper, walked to the fireplace, and fed it to the flames. The paper curled, darkened, and disappeared. I wasn't tearing anything apart. I was letting go of the illusion that I had ever truly been included. I chose silence not as punishment, but as peace. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel forgotten. I felt free. The final message came 3 days after they left the note in my mailbox. No greeting, no warmth. Just one line from my son. If this is how you want it, fine. It didn't sting the way it once might have. It didn't twist my stomach or make my chest tighten. Instead, it settled over me like snow, soft, quiet, final. I sat by the window with a cup of tea, watching as the wind moved through the bare trees in the yard. The sky was pale blue, streaked with long, wispy clouds that looked like brush strokes. The kind of winter sky that feels honest. Empty, but not cruel. That message wasn't a question. It wasn't even an attempt to understand. It was a dismissal, a final push, as if to say, you've had your chance. Now live with it. And I would. Gladly. It was early evening when the next surprise came. An email from a woman I barely remembered, someone who had lived on our street years ago. Her message was brief but kind. I heard what happened. I just want to say, I always admired how you carried yourself. I remember you walking your son to school every day, even in the rain. You were always there. You were always steady. You mattered more than you think. I stared at the words for a long time. My hands trembled slightly, but not from age, from the quiet swell of something that felt dangerously close to peace. Someone had noticed. Not my son, not his wife, not the family I bent over backward to support, but a neighbor from decades ago had seen what they never had, that I had shown up. Every day, later that night, I received a message from my granddaughter again. Her words were different this time. Grandma, I know something's wrong. I'm not little anymore. I can see it. I just want you to know. I love you, no matter what. That one brought tears. Not the kind that make you sob, but the kind that come when your heart finally unclenches. I wrote back, sweetheart, I love you too. More than words can say. And none of this is your fault. One day, when you're older, you'll understand why it's important to protect your heart, even from people who share your name. She didn't reply immediately. But she didn't have to. The next day, I took a long walk. The snow had melted and patches of earth showed through the yard. My boots made soft sounds in the slush. Birds chirped faintly in the trees, a sign that winter wouldn't last forever. I passed the Harrisons' home and waved at Mrs. Harrison, who was sweeping the front steps. She waved back, her face warm. It felt good to be seen, not out of obligation, but simply for being alive. When I got home, I brewed a fresh pot of coffee and sat with my notary documents one last time. I reread everything slowly. No doubts. No second thoughts. This wasn't revenge. It was recognition. My son had made a choice. Over and over again. In missed calls, forgotten birthdays, empty holidays, and dismissive messages. He had taught me that his version of love came with conditions. And I had finally stopped paying the price for it. I sealed the documents in an envelope, marked it clearly, and placed it in the drawer by the front door, where everything important lives now. The silence that followed was the kind that heals. In the days after, I started to notice more things. The way the light hit the floorboards in the morning. The creak of the radiator warming up before dawn. The small joy of watering the plants and watching them lean toward the window. I didn't need noise to feel alive. One evening, while flipping through an old photo album, I stopped at a picture of me holding my son as a baby. He had a full head of dark hair and the softest expression. I stared at that photo for a long time. I whispered I did my best. And I meant it. Because I had. I didn't fail as a mother. I just stopped being someone's fallback plan. The final act came on a Sunday morning. I heard the crunch of tires on gravel and peeked through the curtain. A familiar car. He got out alone. No wife. No daughter. He walked slowly to the porch and looked around. He didn't knock. He just stood there. I opened the door but didn't step outside. He looked at me, eyes unreadable. "So that's it?" he asked. I didn't answer right away. The wind rustled the trees behind him. A crow called in the distance. Then I said quietly, "You made this choice long before I did." His jaw tightened. "You're punishing me." "No," I replied. "I'm respecting myself." He looked like he might speak again, but instead, he turned and walked back to the car. I watched him go, then closed the door gently behind me. The house felt warmer than it had in years. Later, I sat with a pen and paper and wrote a letter, not to send, but to remember. It said, "To anyone who has ever felt invisible, unheard, or discarded, know this. You are allowed to take up space. You are allowed to be loved the way you love others. You don't have to shrink to keep the peace. You don't have to bleed to be appreciated." I folded the letter and tucked it into the back of my journal. And for the first time, I felt whole, because I realized age is not about weakness. It's about dignity. And if you've ever felt like you don't belong, you're not alone. I won't be afraid to tell the truth anymore, even if it hurts.